She worked tirelessly, barely making ends meet. When the CEO followed her home, what he discovered changed everything. The late-night shift at Brightmart superstores was winding down, the aisles quiet except for the few last-minute shoppers. Darius Cole, the billionaire CEO of the company, stood near the back, watching. Dressed in plain jeans and a hoodie, he blended in as just another late-night customer. No one knew who he was. For months, he'd been hearing about one particular employee, Ava Mitchell. She worked double shifts almost every day, rarely took breaks, and always stayed late to help customers. But what caught his attention most? She had recently been seen asking a co-worker if she could take home expired food from the store's break room. That didn't sit right with him. So tonight, he was here to see the truth for himself. As he stood near the registers, he spotted her. Ava, in her worn-out uniform, rubbing her tired eyes, ringing up the last customers. Her shift ended minutes later. She clocked out, grabbed a small bag of groceries, nothing more than a few basic items, and stepped out into the cold night. Darius watched as she pulled her thin jacket tighter around herself and started walking. No car, no ride, just her, alone, heading home after working nearly 16 hours. Something in his chest tightened. Without hesitation, he followed her. Ava walked for nearly 20 minutes through the dimly lit streets until she reached a small, run-down apartment complex. She climbed the steps to the second floor and disappeared inside. Darius hesitated, then made his way closer. Through the window, he saw something that broke him. Inside the tiny apartment, Ava's 2 young children sat at a small table, waiting for their mother to come home. The moment she stepped in, they ran to her, hugging her tightly. She kissed their foreheads, then went to the kitchen, taking out the little food she had brought home. She didn't eat. Instead, she quietly served the food to her kids, watching them with tired, loving eyes. Darius felt his stomach drop. His employee, one of the hardest working people in his company, was struggling to feed her own children. And that was unacceptable. Taking a deep breath, he pulled out his phone and made a call. Tomorrow, Ava's life was going to change forever. The next morning, Ava walked into Brightmart, exhaustion weighing heavily on her shoulders. Another long shift. Another day of barely making ends meet. But as soon as she stepped inside, something felt different. Her co-workers stared at her, whispered. Some even smiled. Confused, she headed toward the break room to clock in, only to freeze in place. Darius Cole, the CEO of Brightmart, was standing there, waiting. Her heart pounded. Why was the CEO here? And why was he looking at her? Darius took a step forward, his voice calm but firm. Ava Mitchell? She swallowed hard, nodding. Yes, sir. He studied her for a moment, then said something that made her breath hitch. I followed you home last night. Ava's blood ran cold. What? Before she could react, he continued. I saw how hard you work. I saw how you walk home after double shifts. I saw your kids waiting for you, and I saw you giving them all the food you had, while you went to bed hungry. Ava's throat tightened. No one was supposed to know. She shook her head, flustered. Sir, I'm fine, really. Darius held up a hand, stopping her. No, you're not. And that's not okay with me. She blinked, confused. What did he mean? Then he pulled something from his pocket and handed it to her. A letter. With trembling hands, she opened it. Her eyes widened. It was a promotion. A corporate position with triple her current salary. She gasped. Sir, Darius wasn't finished. That's not all. Your kids deserve better. So as of today, Brightmart is covering your rent for the next year. Ava staggered back, her breath catching in her throat. Tears welled in her eyes. This wasn't real. This had to be a dream. I don't know what to say, she choked out. Darius smiled. Then don't say anything. Just take care of your kids. A sob escaped her as she covered her mouth. For the first time in years, she felt relief. Real, overwhelming relief. Around them, her co-workers clapped, some wiping away tears of their own. Ava looked up at Darius, eyes shining. "Thank you." He nodded. Number. "Thank you, Ava, for proving what hard work and sacrifice look like. Now it's time for someone to take care of you." And at that moment she knew her life had just changed forever. 1 year later. Ava stood in front of the Brightmart corporate headquarters, dressed in a crisp blazer, her nameplate now reading, Ava Mitchell, Regional Operations Manager. She still couldn't believe it. 1 year ago, she was barely surviving. Now, she was overseeing multiple store locations, ensuring that employees, especially single parents like her, were given real opportunities. She turned toward the large conference room where Darius Cole stood at the front, addressing a crowd of Brightmart employees. "Tonight," he said, "we celebrate the people who keep this company running. The workers who go above and beyond, not just for us, but for their families. People like—" He glanced toward her and smiled. "Ava Mitchell." Applause erupted as Ava stood, her heart pounding. Darius gestured for her to come up. Ava's story is one of resilience. 1 year ago, she was working double shifts, walking home at night just to provide for her children. And today? He turned toward her proudly. "She's leading our company into the future." Ava swallowed back tears as she stepped up to the podium. She scanned the crowd and saw her 2 children sitting in the front row, watching her with pride. Taking a deep breath, she spoke into the microphone. "A year ago, I thought no one saw me, that my hard work didn't matter." She turned to Darius. "But someone did, and because of that, everything changed." She smiled, looking out at the employees who sat in the same place she once had. "Now it's my turn to pay it forward, because no hard-working person should ever feel invisible." The room exploded with applause, employees rising to their feet. Darius clapped, nodding at her. "That's what Brightmart stands for." As Ava stepped off the stage, she hugged her children tightly, whispering, "We made it." And in that moment, she knew. This wasn't just her success story. It was the beginning of a new future for everyone who just needed a chance. 5 years later. The towering Brightmart global headquarters buzzed with excitement. Tonight was a celebration, the launch of the company's new initiative to support single parents and low-income families. Standing at the center of it all was Ava Mitchell, now Executive Vice President of Operations, the second highest position in the company, just under Darius Cole. She looked around the packed auditorium, seeing faces filled with hope, employees, their families, and even customers who had benefited from the company's shift in culture. Darius stood beside her, beaming with pride. "Ready to show them what you built?" Ava nodded, stepping to the podium. She wasn't the same exhausted, overworked cashier from 5 years ago. Today, she was a leader, ready to lift others up, just as Darius had lifted her. "Thank you all for being here," Ava began, her voice steady but laced with emotion. 5 years ago, I stood in this very building, terrified that I'd lose everything. But someone saw me, not just as an employee, but as a person. She glanced at Darius, gratitude and respect in her eyes. And now, it's my turn to pay it forward. The screen behind her lit up with the program's title. The Bright Future Initiative, $50 million pledged to support employee education, childcare, and housing stability. Gasps filled the room before the applause burst out, loud and electric. Ava's 2 children ran onto the stage, embracing her. Darius leaned into the microphone, grinning. Ava Mitchell built this program from the ground up. She knows what it means to struggle, and what it means to overcome. Tears shone in Ava's eyes as she pulled her kids close. "This isn't about charity," she said. "It's about recognizing that the hardest working people among us deserve the strongest support. We're not just changing policies, we're changing lives. The crowd rose in a standing ovation. Darius turned to Ava, clapping as hard as anyone else. You know, I might need to start looking for a new CEO soon. Ava laughed, but the determination in her eyes was clear. Whenever you're ready. And as the music swelled and the crowd cheered, Ava looked around the hall, filled with people who believed in what she believed, that no one deserved to struggle alone. Her journey from a tired cashier to a powerhouse executive wasn't just a success story. It was a promise, one that she intended to keep, for everyone who just needed a chance. 10 years later, the massive conference hall was packed with thousands of employees, business leaders and journalists from around the world. Brightmart had officially become one of the most employee-focused companies in the nation. At the center of it all, standing behind the podium, was Ava Mitchell, now the CEO of Brightmart. She took a deep breath, looking out at the crowd. 10 years ago, she was barely surviving. Now, she was leading a billion-dollar company. Darius Cole sat in the front row, watching with pride. He had stepped down, passing the reins to the woman who had earned it more than anyone. Ava adjusted the microphone, her voice strong and steady. When I started at Brightmart, I was a single mother working double shifts just to put food on the table. I never imagined I'd be standing here today. She smiled as she saw her now grown children in the audience, watching her with admiration. But one act of kindness changed my life. Someone believed in me when I had nothing left. And now, as CEO, I will make sure that every hard-working employee in this company is given that same chance. The screen behind her lit up with Brightmart's newest initiative, $500 million pledged toward employee housing, education, and financial assistance. The room erupted in applause. Darius stood, clapping the loudest. He had always known she would go far. But this was more than even he had imagined. Ava turned toward him, her voice filled with gratitude. Darius Cole, you gave me an opportunity when no one else would. Because of you, my life changed forever. And now, I will spend the rest of my career making sure that no hard-working person ever feels invisible again. The entire room rose to their feet, a standing ovation echoing through the hall. Ava smiled, looking out at the thousands of employees, the very people she had once worked alongside. She had gone from struggling to thriving, from overlooked to unstoppable. And now, she was the one changing lives. Because one moment of kindness didn't just change her story, it created a legacy.